Welcome to New Mexico Restaurants Now, where we get you the inside scoop on the food scene across New Mexico. This episode is sponsored by The Hand Solution, providing high-quality hand sanitizer at a competitive price. Stay tuned to the end to hear about their special offer. I'm Carol White, CEO of the New Mexico Restaurant Association, and our guest today is George Gundrey with Tomasita's in Santa Fe and Albuquerque and Atrisco Cafe in Santa Fe. Tomasita serves traditional northern New Mexico cuisine, and we'll hear more about Atrisco Cafe in this interview with George. Welcome, George.
Hello.
Glad to have you here.
Likewise.
Well, George, how long have we known each other?
I don't know. at least
question,
3 years.
Huh? At least 3 years, yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me about how you got your start in restaurants.
Let's see. I got my start in restaurants when I was born. So my parents had a restaurant in Santa Fe called the Mayflower Café. And in 1968, my mom actually worked in the restaurant the day I was born.
Wow.
Went home.
Before or after? Okay. Yeah, you're going to tell us.
Yes. Went home and went into labor, went to St. Vincent's Hospital. I was born 45 minutes later.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was also born at St. Vincent's.
Nice.
And as we like to call it, St. Victims, right?
Yep.
So
my mother and father had a restaurant called the Mayflower Cafe in downtown Santa Fe from like 1967 to 1972. And they got divorced, and that's how that ended. And then my mom started Tomasita's, technically took it over, but really started it in 1974.
Tell me about the history of Tomasita's, because I know it from your menu. I've read it, but interesting here.
Yeah, I mean, Tomasita's, it really starts actually, the history really begins in Albuquerque at Central and Atrisco, because my grandmother and my grandfather came from Greece in the 30s. And my grandfather unfortunately passed away when my mom was about 5 years old. But my grandmother and her second husband started a restaurant called the Central Cafe, which was at Central and Atrisco. And that was there for over 20 years. And basically, my mom and all her siblings, my mom Georgia and all her siblings grew up in the barrio there. So while the Central Cafe served like traditional cafe food, they were famous for their fried chicken and burgers and stuff like that. In the neighborhood, it was the traditional Hispanic food. It was a very Hispanic working class neighborhood. The restaurant and the home, which was connected to the restaurant, were right next to a trailer park. And, that's where they learned about red and green chili and, the tortillas and all that kind of stuff. So that's really where it started. And my mom, went to college a little bit and then, ended up in the restaurant business and did it her whole life. And she's still doing it.
She's wonderful. Georgia is a real character.
Yeah.
But she's also lucky to have you, because I know, so many folks that are her age have restaurants that they don't have that next generation to pass it on to. So I'm thrilled that she has you to pass it on, and it's going to continue. Yeah. So I want to know about, let's start with Tomasita's. I consider it some of the best red chili on the planet in New Mexico. I probably shouldn't say that, but I'm a red chili aficionado, and I am very particular about that. I also believe that red chili is much better in northern New Mexico and green chili is much better in southern New Mexico, but those are only my beliefs. So tell us about Tomasita's. It is very traditional New Mexican.
Right. So, I mean, this again goes back to the Atrisco barrio, but amongst the elderly Hispanic ladies of New Mexico, there's two kind of religions about red chili. There's the Caribe clan and there's the Powder clan. And Tomasita Leyva and Tomasitas is the Caribe clan. And what that means is we use the whole chili pod, and we basically clean the stem off and we soak the whole pod. And then we make a paste from water in the whole pod. The powder people take the pod and they grind it into a powder and they make it that way. That's the wrong way to do it. The right way to
Okay.
do it is to use the whole pod. So that's like a really key thing. And then also just the quality of the chili. So there's a lot of red chili now that is actually what they call kiln dried. It's not dried in the sun in the fields. It's harvested as soon as it's red, and it's actually put in ovens and dried. But we use exclusively sun dried chili. And most of the year, 99% of the time, our chili comes from one farm down south called Delgado Farms. And the lady Alicia, like myself, is a second generation farmer. So we were buying a red chili. My mom was buying red chili from her father, and I'm buying it from her. And it's sun dried. They really know what they're doing. It's actually only about a 40-acre farm, but all of our red chili comes out of there. So it starts with the really good raw ingredient. And then we soak it and we use the Caribe method. And then the last thing is we don't mess with it. I'll tell you the secret recipe. It's just red chili paste, garlic, salt, and roux, which is olive oil and flour. And that's it.
So wonderful. And thank you for that introduction to differences in red chili, because there is a major difference when you taste, it's the same chili, but it's been done just a little bit different, and there is a different flavor to it.
Absolutely.
And I want to just, for those folks who may not be from New Mexico, our official state question is red or green. And that is officially went through our legislature, everything. And you will find that when you go into a restaurant, they ask you immediately, red or green. And now we can get Christmas as well, which is red and green. When I was growing up, you could not do that. That was sacrilege, right? So one thing I want to mention also is that green chili is the immature chili as it comes off the vine. Red chili is the more mature, dried, same chili pod. Again, very different flavors depending on how it's cooked and how it's done. But that is the difference. It's not a different chili or a different chili pod. It's the same chili pod, just one is more mature and turns red.
Absolutely.
So you didn't ever tell us the story about Tomasita.
Okay, so Tomasitas, my mother was divorced. She was working as a waitress at a restaurant in Cerrillos, New Mexico, actually, and we lived off of Hickok Street in Santa Fe, and there was this little restaurant called Tomasitas, and it had been there for about a year and a half, 2 years, and in that time it had actually gone through 2 different owners. And the namesake, though, was Tomasita Leyva, and she was still there. It had been started by her son-in-law or her daughter-in-law, I'm not sure. And then they sold it to this other couple. And my mom and my brother went in there, and the food was just outrageous. And they just kept going back. And she kind of got word. The poor gentleman actually fell off a roof. And so he couldn't keep the business going anymore. And she basically just came up with she just on a lark said, you know what, I'll take this off your hands. And they negotiated a deal where she basically paid off his debts, and she took over the restaurant. And, the myth of Tomasitas is this. So she got the key and she went in the first morning, and there was Tomasita Leyva standing there stirring a pot of beans. And Tomasita just looked up and she said, well, you're going to hear, you're going to fire me. And my mom said, oh, I think I'll keep you. And Tomasita was part of our family, until the day she died in 1985. So they were together for about 11 years, and they had a very strong, very powerful relationship. And Tomasita was a spitfire. She was, literally 80, 90 pounds, 4'10" or something, and very passionate. She could be very mean. If you were on her good side, you were on her good side. But if you were on her bad side, you were on her bad side.
We know a lot of cooks like that, don't we?
She was a great lady. And yeah, she was a great lady and very detail oriented and very giving. And that's kind of how it started. And it was this little cafe on Hickok Street that had about 35 seats. and it went very well, very well. And after 5 years of that, the location in the rail yard where we are now became available, and my mom was able to get a lease there, and we've been there ever since 1979.
So tell me a little bit about that location and your other location in Albuquerque, and then we'll go on to Atrisco Cafe.
Sure. I mean, it's Tomasita's has been there since in that location since 1979.
Wow.
And very, we say my logo, my thing is we don't mess with the chili. So it's the traditional New Mexican recipes. We haven't changed a lot, but we've tried to evolve a little bit over the years. Everything's made from scratch. And it's just the New Mexican food. So it's a really beautiful thing because it's over the years, it's a multi-generational institution. So, people that I went to high school, there's one guy in particular, he tells me, it's the same combo burrito green I used to eat in high school. And it's exactly the same. And I love it. I've been ordering the same thing for 40 years, and that's what I get. And that's what it is. And then obviously, Santa Fe people leave, they come back. When folks come back, they have to go to Tomasita's, and that's just part of your visit home to Santa Fe. You've got to make one trip to Tomasita's. So I'm definitely very, very blessed that, on the foundation that was built and that I've been able to maintain it.
So I want to tell folks that if you take the Rail Runner, which is our local train from Albuquerque to Santa Fe, that is like you are dropped off right at Tomasita's, and you can walk across the just the parking lot to Tomasita's, and it's wonderful.
Yep.
And it's a great fun trip too, because then you can eat at Tomasita's, go to the plaza, take a few hours, come back and get back on the train and go back to Albuquerque.
Yeah.
And you also have go ahead.
Just a funny story about that. When if you go to Santa Fe now, the rail yard's this big, beautiful commercial district, and it's the center of attention. Everything's happening. When my mom moved in there, it was a wasteland. It was warehouses and homeless encampments. And actually, the building across the street was a halfway house for people on methadone. And so when she went in there, people are like, "You're crazy. Why are you moving into that location? That's horrible." There had been 3 different restaurants or bars that had been in that location that had failed prior to her, like in 5 years. And my mom just said, "Hey, look at the map of Santa Fe. This is walking distance from the plaza. I mean, this is a great location." And the other thing is, it had a lot of parking. And
Yes.
we're really big on parking. If you know anything about the restaurant business, parking's important. So she was really a trailblazer in terms of being one of the first people to see what happened there with the rail yard. And she got in there, and here we are 45 years later.
And there's an actual train that runs there now, which there was not in the beginning. So
Yeah.
good choice.
Yeah, there
Mom.
was no train. Yeah, absolutely. There was no train.
Yeah. So
absolutely not. There was no train, there was no rail yard, there was no park, there was nothing.
So tell us a little bit about the location in Albuquerque. You're right off of I-25. If somebody's traveling through, they can get there from I-40 in about 2 minutes. And if they're traveling down I-25, they can certainly just stop in and go to your restaurant. It's big, beautiful. Tell us about Albuquerque.
Well, basically, as a second generation person, I didn't want to just run my mom's restaurant and do that, which I could have done and made a good living. I wanted to grow and expand. And, and we've heard it for years. When are you coming to Albuquerque? You've got to come to Albuquerque. We drive here every weekend to come eat here all the way from Albuquerque. So once I really, knew what I was doing in terms of running a restaurant, which took about 10 years, I decided to just take the plunge and expand. So we went hunting around for a location, decided to get a very big location. And we've been there for 3 years, and it's been very successful. So we're very, very pleased.
A big location with lots of parking, I would like to say.
Yes, lots of parking, ample parking.
So tell me then about Atrisco Cafe.
Okay, so the Atrisco Cafe, it's kind of boring, but I'll tell you the whole story. When I decided, when I graduated from high school, I went to college in California, and then I was living in the Bay Area, and I had a different career there. I was doing something totally outside of the restaurant biz, and had my first child there. Moved, got married, had my first child, moved back to New Mexico in 2005. Not really thinking necessarily I'd go into the restaurant business. Well, at some point, I decided that I wanted to take over the family business. And I had this vision in mind that I would for restaurants. So don't ask me why. Again, I didn't want to just rest on my mom's laurels. I wanted to grow, expand. So my cousin Ignatios, who's still with us, was running Tomasitas, and he kind of had a 10-year agreement to operate Tomasitas from 2001 through 2010. Well, in 2008, my aunt, my mom's sister, she had a restaurant called Diego's Cafe for 19 years, which is in the DeVargas Center here in Santa Fe. And she decided to close, and she had a great location, and she also had a still has had a liquor license. And a light bulb went off, and I was like, I know I'm scheduled to take over the family business in 2010, but maybe I should start my second restaurant now. And it's a funny story because I went in to see my mom, and I said, I have this idea. And she says, I have an idea I want to talk to you about. And it was the same idea.
Really?
So we started the Atrisco Cafe, and the idea was to still be that New Mexican food, but have it be a little bit different than Tomasitas. The heart is the same. And so I also came from California with much more of an interest in, farm to table and, issues about the ingredient quality and stuff like that. So it was a good opportunity to start fresh. Everything's made from scratch. There's no hydrogenated stuff in there. We get some stuff from some local producers. I mean, the red and green has always been from southern New Mexico, but we get lamb and other things and the beef. And so just decided to do it, and it's been very successful. People love it. People absolutely love it. And you can tell it's the same soul, but it's just a little bit different.
Well, great. I didn't
But
realize
it's still got full
that
bar and a good
before
margarita.
Tomasitas. Yeah, nice. Yes, and
Yep.
do you guys have a specialty
Yep.
margarita? I'm sure everybody does, right? Tell me how it's made.
Well, we have a different. We do have the famous swirl at the Atrisco. Tomasitas, the swirl is the margaritas, right? So the swirl is just a frozen margarita with a swirl of sangria. And I like to say it sounds disgusting, but it's delicious.
It's delicious.
And it was just something that a bartender at Tomasitas invented one day, and no one knows exactly who or where or when, but they were just there one day, and it's really blown up. So that's definitely our signature drink.
Nice. Yes, and my staff and I, we try to make it over there when we can drink so that we can have a swirl. It's a thing to do. Yeah.
It is.
So I want to talk to you about what your favorite dish is on your menu. Either place.
I'm kind of old school, like some of my customers. When push comes to shove, it's a toss up between. I always get the roast beef burrito.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, we have a taco meat burrito, and then we have a combo burrito, which is beans and taco meat, and then we have roast beef, which is just a round of roast beef that we roast and slice very thinly and put it in there, and it's just delicious, and that's all there is to it, really.
And do you have red or green?
You know what? I usually go Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
I do go Christmas. So,
all right.
Yeah, green is the gateway chili. I think you
it is.
Everyone starts green, and then you graduate to red, but then eventually, after so many years, you got to go both ways.
Yeah, I haven't gone both ways. And I started out, I loved chili when I was 2 years old. Mm-hmm. My favorite dish was pozole. And then I was eating red enchiladas when I was 3. And loved it. I mean, so I did
Yeah,
go green when I lived in southern New Mexico because honestly, their green chili is that much better. I don't eat green chili in northern New Mexico. Interesting.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not
Um,
true.
so tell me what your customer's favorite is. So we've heard what your favorite is. What's the biggest seller on your menu?
We have like a combination plate. It's the Tuesday special. And that is a relleno, a blue corn chicken enchilada, and a taco. And that tends to be one of the most common. But the most common dish is chicken enchilada.
Yeah.
Your basic enchilada. That's what people want. That's
Got to
your
have
bread
it
and
with
butter,
sour
right?
cream too, right? Chicken enchiladas with sour cream.
Yep. Some
Certain
people like
ways
it with
things
sour cream.
yeah. Certain
Yep.
ways things have to be served. Yeah. And so my favorite at Tomasita's is a blue corn, red chili, cheese enchilada plate. It's fabulous.
You get the egg on top.
I do get the egg on top. Yes.
So that is a local dish right there. A cheese enchilada red with an egg over easy. When visitors come, I say if you want to get what the locals eat, that's what you should get, and they love it every time.
But be ready for some heat, right? I mean, you can't be a
Oh yeah,
baby about it. You've got to be able to handle your heat.
absolutely.
Which if you're coming to New Mexico for food, that should be what you're coming for anyway. Um,
Absolutely.
so, we're sitting here kind of pretending that the pandemic has not happened, and I don't want to leave this without saying, I think you've done some wonderful things during the pandemic shutdown, and I just want to know, how do you see the industry going forward from here, and how do you see things going?
Wow. You know what? I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, everything's up in the air. I know it's interesting. Like first we thought that, it was going to be this horrible disaster, which of course it is. But now we're finding out that some restaurants are doing much better than others. And unfortunately, like fast food restaurants are doing very well, whereas your old school sit down, takeout, sit down restaurants, dine in, where a server comes, a professional wait person and takes care of you. Those are the ones that are really stressed. And I think there's going to be a lot of turnover, change in that space. Um, and so that's very scary. I mean, there's a lot of restaurants that are not going to come back. There's some that are, we're going to see what happens this winter. So I think in the long term, people want to eat out and they're going to eat out. But in the short term, I mean, who knows? I think we're going to lose a lot of really good restaurants, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of too. And it is those kind of mom and pop sit down restaurants that we all know and love, and the
Yep.
ones with the real local food that are in danger. And so I certainly appreciate talking to you. It's always fun. George is very energetic. He's on my board of directors, and I just love having him around because he gives me a lot of energy. I feed off of it really well. So,
Thank you.
George, yeah, well, thank you. I want to thank our sponsor, The Hand Solution, who provides high quality hand sanitizer and disinfectant at a competitive price. Order your NMRA restaurant kit today at thehandsolution.com/NMRA. And thanks everybody for tuning in to the New Mexico Restaurants Now. You can watch this and other episodes on the New Mexico Restaurants Now YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to the audio podcast at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Thanks to The Hand Solution for sponsoring this episode, and George, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.